Yeah, we're back. Hi, guys.
Mike from around the world. How you doing tonight, Mike?
Pastor Paul, doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I really am. I feel great. Great to have you on. Just kind of.
Hey, Diane. Good day, Tricky. Good to see you guys.
I'm looking at the solar flare erupting on the sun. I put a map up showing all the massive wildfires burning out of control in Canada, the smoke that's choking us out here in America. You told us we were going to have a smoke environment, an ash environment.
Hi, Cactus. Good to see you, mate.
Air traffic control's in a mess. There's a heat wave in Texas. You can't even breathe. Fed now. You brought that up last week. What is that? Even the famous Tiffany's stores on fire. They're trying to. Russia's arrested or detained General Armageddon. What's that about? Aliens, spacecraft, or pieces of it. 50 perfectly round spheres of some type of metallic metal that's not from this world. They found in the bottom of the ocean. That family you talked about in Las Vegas, they had to get an attorney. So many people are trying to get in their house and walk in their yard. Tornado on the top of Casper Mountain in Wyoming.
What?
We had Montana like 3 weeks ago. Now we got one in Wyoming. Hail the size of baseballs in Denver. In Okinawa, Japan. Other than that, I'm doing okay.
Fire season is just beginning.
Okay.
We got about just in case
Can I hardly hear him?
Past all the ocean waters are extremely they're hotter than what they were last week, and it's reorganizing every single storm system that we have out there. And it's like a bunch of
sounds playing up.
Clouds are moving in unison. For example, there is all the clouds all the way up to Canada, all the way up to Greenland are moving in. They're synchronized with some of the clouds moving all the way down to Mexico and Brazil. Synchronized. That means they're all on a one system in sense. It is the wildest thing that a lot of people have ever seen, and it's about to cause some really bad storms. In fact, they have warnings that should go out in the next 4 hours. Some of the folks in Missouri, Illinois, those places, Kentucky.
Finally, I got the audio going.
Strong straight line winds. With these fall storms comes a massive potential. Mexico is about to get hit, obviously. And, it just builds on from there. And fire season is just now beginning. It's unfortunate. We don't have a lot of rain right before the 4th of July because many lands are basically a tinderbox. So you can imagine what would happen if some of these fires get going. And the earth is burning as it is. If you looked at some of the fire tracks going all the way down to South America, China.
Tricky, I'm getting a haircut on Monday before Gabe gets home, coincidentally. Gabe gets home on Tuesday.
Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Russia, Australia, there are fires all over the place. Canada is just one example that has drawn attention, but fires are beginning all over the place.
Wow. Well, I know Indiana. I was just up there. It didn't rain for 3 weeks. Now, after I left, it rained Sunday, and they got a little bit of rain Tuesday. But I mean, it did not rain for 3 weeks. The grass, everybody's grass was brown. There was nothing green. The crops were suffering. So if a fire was to break loose in that country, it'd be outrageous. Yeah.
I think it will because of the 4th and the way people are. I do
Ah,
believe
okay.
that something not so good will take place. People are not very responsible with fireworks, and some people underestimate just how fast these fires can begin.
Take off, yeah.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
So, Mike, also with the fire map, as you've been talking about here, and the smoke and the plume and all that choking us out, and it's not good for our health. We know that. There was, again, how can we have tornadoes on top of mountains?
Yeah,
Can you help me
exactly.
understand that? They never have heard of this. Montana and now Wyoming.
Well, if you start looking at some of the systems that are going around the earth and some of the past stabilities that we have, you'll notice a steep change in ocean temperatures. Number one, that's a driver of storms. That's a main driver. In our atmosphere, we have disturbances. Everybody's going to be aware of certain disturbances that we're having in the atmosphere, and it's not caused by anything natural that we know of. But I think that everybody's going to be well versed in weird things here shortly. But
wait a minute,
we have something influencing.
You said it's not caused by natural.
No, it's
something
not natural.
Else, something else.
Yeah, it's not natural. Not natural. We've never had this. We've never had what people will see with their own eyes. Nobody has ever seen something like that. Not in living times. It's not in written history. Not that we know of. And so, it's going to be something that will, it's going to definitely give people a moment of pause. They'll begin to realize that we live in a very different time, in a very different world. People will see it day in and day out. In fact, they'll start seeing a lot of things day in and day out. But this in particular will absolutely change the minds of so many. But it will also saturate the internet with a bunch of self-made experts.
Oh man, he's hard.
Right.
It's not going to be a
tough
good thing,
crowd.
but that naturally happens. But that's right around the corner. Fastball. That's not, that could honestly be within, a few days or 2 weeks or something like that. It could honestly, it's that close.
Okay, are we talking about like something coming from the heavens, like the binary system that we've been talking about? Or are we?
Well, it could do with it. It does. It has to do with binary system.
Okay.
That's certain things that people have talked about that have been theory. Well, they're not going to be theory here too much longer. Every child, every person, every adult, everybody's going to see it all the time. And so,
so you're saying we're 2 weeks? Are we possibly could be 2 weeks away for this?
Well, it could be. It could be. It depends. Nobody can control what's happening.
Hey, Lynn, good to see ya.
It's totally out of man's control. Nobody's controlling that, and it is certainly influencing everything on the planet.
Wow. Okay. Well, we've been talking about it, Mike. You and I have been talking about it for almost 10 years. I remember when you first brought up 5 waves of energy, and people just freaked out, and they said, "What in the world is he talking about?" Well, you told us that we would see the sun react. You told us that the oceans were going to heat up. You told us that the magma was rising. You told us that an ash and smoke environment would come, that fires would burn. You told us about the plagues that would come. We've been crustal, hurricanes, outrageous typhoons. So we've been following along this path. But I'm hearing you say it's close to where everyone will see it, and it ain't.
Oh yeah,
it's not of this world.
No, it isn't. It will change. It'll change. It'll change everything. It will. People will just have to get used to it.
Will people literally get?
Yeah, Diane, my grandson had a bit of the flu. I think he's passed it on to me.
Afraid and die from it.
I think they will. I think they will. I think that it's happened. A similar thing. Well, not similar to this, but people have seen less, and they have. Their hearts couldn't take it, and it's unfortunate, especially as believers. Because believers read the Bible, and we know what the Lord said. But it's almost like, Pastor Paul, we talk about subjects, but the general populace, they're not really expecting anything to upset their world. For example, they see the government's going all over the place, right? Things are not going right. And of course, in the Bible, we see a realignment of governmental structure and power. We
Yep.
see things working differently. But one of the issues is people, they don't like change. And a lot of people, well, they don't want to talk about nor know about things that are happening
Tricky, I'll swap the whiskey for a beer.
like that. Likely because morality has dropped. They have so many people stressed out in their own personal situations that they couldn't take another thing. So, of course, when they see something else, it's going to be a tipping point. It won't be an earthquake, it won't be a volcano. You know, it won't be like that. Everybody can handle that to a degree, but they cannot handle their entire world changing. And how the world works, and everything will change.
It is going to be a game changer.
Yeah, well,
when they see what they're going to see in the heavens.
Yeah, well,
Mike, let's talk about the. We'll come back to that. Well, because that just sounds like that's taking precedent over everything. Okay, let's talk about the Mark of the Beast system for a minute. I mean, we can read it in Revelation 13. We've talked about it. You know, those are on this broadcast, but you mentioned FedNow last week. I did some research on FedNow. I understand it's a new system of banking, especially with merchants and what have you. But is it a covering? Is it a cloak for what's really coming? Can we talk about that?
It's a back system, a funneling system, you could say, right? You can't scare. They don't want to scare the populace with their finances. If they ever did that, they would lose absolute. If people go broke, right? Government has just lost control. There's no way they can have control. And so it's a general consensus that if people ever perceive that their money has been tampered with a bit too much, they're going to lose power the same day. No one will adhere to any type of structure of law. And so people will have their money, but they're changing everything else outside of that. FedNow is one of those avenues that everybody will have to eventually. Their money will go into something like that with absolute accountability. And then, of course, to the merchants, retail establishments, person to person, you name it. FedNow is a computer system. It's based on some of the CBD systems that are coming out. Of course, the IMF is all behind it. The Federal Reserve is the one primarily responsible for it. They're about to launch. The Federal Reserve is about to launch their currency. Did you know that?
No.
And so we have a lot of changes taking place. And so essentially, everybody's financial transactions are going to be funneled through a system, right? You can't forget about AI. You can't forget about some of the new internet technologies that just came out. And all this goes together, right? To have 100% accountability of what people are doing. Why? The guise is everybody has a carbon footprint.
Okay.
Right? Everybody does. And so that's a good introduction or a way to actually control resources. So here's a fact. Resources are becoming scarce, right? Not because they're naturally becoming scarce. It's because they're trying to formulate a way to encourage people in a very different way to get them to go along with some of what they're doing. Let's take bread.
Yeah, he's in the middle of summer.
Everybody likes bread.
Right.
Have you noticed the change in the formula of bread? Anybody notice bread tastes a bit sweeter than it used to? And have you noticed that certain molds will not grow on bread anymore?
Yes, I know that. That's weird.
Have you seen some of the fruits that they have on the shelves that last for 180 days?
What? 180 days?
Yes.
Because they're
very special tag on them. But more fruits. Seems like every month they're being added to that list. Why? They're making the crops resilient to radiation, right? To increase radiation, to exotic cosmic rays. We're dealing with that stuff. It's killed off the other wheat. Hey, if you take a potato and cut it in half, put it out in your house anywhere, see how fast it takes to turn brown. Now, what that represents is how many toxins are floating around in your house, right? The inside of a potato is going to degrade pretty fast when it's in the presence of toxins, right? You take some of these new potatoes that they have, they will not turn brown at all. They just won't do it. And so They passed that law during COVID-19 that the wheat they can have GMO wheat, and they don't have to tell you it's GMO wheat. They can have GMO fruit, and they don't have to tell you it's GMO fruit, right?
Wow.
That law has been passed. That happened during COVID-19.
Okay.
And so there are many other laws that passed also, which have, it's just thrust everything forward, and everything is getting prepared for this change.
So,
Very,
okay,
very
so what I'm
real
getting
change.
so what you're saying is we're going to be inundated with the radiation and a toxic environment. So they've genetically modified the food to be able to handle more
That's
of
right.
that. So
That's right.
so there'll be something to eat, even if it's not good for us.
That's
At
right.
least, okay. And you're saying that's all of this is being set up, including the underground cities and all the rest of the stuff we see going on, is because of this binary system. This, what do we, if you call it Planet X or Nibiru, folks, or Planet Number 9, or whatever you want to call it, you're saying it's literally going to change our environment, and so we're already changing our environment to prepare for it.
Yeah, we are. We are. The environment's already changing. The government's bought up most of the farms, and Bill Gates owns the other half. He has 4 of those companies that have been approved for food manufacturing, right?
Yeah.
Same companies that make vaccines now make your food. It's been that way for the last, 2 years? And now that stuff is on the shelves, including rice, wheat, all your basic products, butter, Blue Bonnet. Some of the other ones have changed their formula, right? While farmers dump out the milk, all that good stuff, right? Because what they're doing, Fastballs, everything is being set up to be absolutely 100% inventoried, right? We're going to have a no-loss society. Why? Because the competitive nature, when people work hard for money and some people don't, right?
Right.
Money is not really going to be based on that anymore. It's not going to be based on that. It won't quite be socialism either, because we live in a computer world, correct? So we live in a computer world, and you have automation centers going up all over the place, by the way, which are quite efficient, right? Nobody should ever say a robot can't do what they do.
No, I know.
Because
yeah.
robots already handle a lot of the shipping processes, and people don't really touch it, right?
Right.
In fact, there's a 9,000 square foot facility that only requires 2 people to be on board.
Wow.
Every I think 12 hours or something like that, and they have robots running everything, and it's run flawlessly so far. Car manufacturing, same thing. So we'll have technology, we'll have the toys, we'll have all this stuff. But what we won't have, the number one thing people won't have, is control over how they control their own assets, right? This central bank digital currency is, people wouldn't believe how much is in place already, how fast they're going to switch it over. They're taking the technology. All countries are in on the same thing. This is what's surprising.
Oh, wow.
The International Monetary Fund, they follow this. They're the ones that said that China's technology, right? China agreed to beta test some of the most of the algorithms in this system already. So guess what they did? China wrote a lot of the some of the algorithms for processing and everything else. You have England, right? They did the exact same thing with identification, with some of the APIs, and this, that, and the other. You have Bahrain and all these other places in the Middle East, and Dubai. They agreed to do the other portions of it. So the whole world's in on this thing. Russia has contributed. Everybody has contributed. Oh, and by the way, they still contribute. But the switch is coming quite fast, right? That means if you're a millionaire and you have millions of dollars in the bank, that's like, you can't, if you draw all that out, that's not going to help you anything. That's not going to help you, because the retail establishment is going to be absolutely controlled. They have
well said.
bills coming that all commerce is going to have to be compliant to these 4 bills, which means retail stores, even the tiny ones, are going to have to be compliant with the new structure of finances.
So are you saying it don't matter how much money you got, you can't even get in the front door if you don't have the correct identification code or
That's right.
QR code,
That's right.
Whatever?
That's right. So they're going to make everybody compliant. At first, people are just going to say, it's no big deal. And I'm telling you right now, they're going to love it. They're going to love it, Fastball. They're going to love it. No hackers, right? You don't have to worry about anybody stealing your money. And while everybody's enjoying this new thing, right? I'll tell you what, it's very wise right now to have something set aside, something that's
Tangible.
for a season, something set aside like metal, some sort of metal set aside. Here's why. When they do this, you don't want all of your funds locked into a bank and you have no reasonable control to go to. There will be other exchanges, right? That means having some precious metal is going to be about the only way you can ever have anything at home. As far as paper money, it's not going to work because paper money is simply a note. It's countable for. It has a serial number. By the way, the AI system with the central bank, they already have that serial number. So you're not going to get anything off that. When you have money yourself, though, right? You're mobile. You can go to any place and exchange that for actual, whatever you want. But if you have money, you're going to be tied to a zone. Oh, by the way, with this new, with these digital currency coming out, the world is zoned already. I think they finalized the zones in the UN. Zoned. I believe that happens at the end of July. Yeah.
What do you mean zoned?
So the world is zoned right now. They have zones for every single part of the world right now, right? And it's all according to this one system.
Wow.
And
okay, now are you talking like 10 zones? Like you don't worry about countries, just
everybody. We're talking about all land masses are now zoned, right? So if you're in a specific zone, right, you're going to be assigned, a specific number. You'll have a number pool, identification pool, all that good stuff will go in there. So everybody in those zones is going to be locked in those zones for a while. That's going to be part of their identification.
Well, let me ask you a question, because what you're saying is, let's say I'm in zone 777. As long as I stay in my zone, and I have my QR code of whatever, or my biometric thing, I can go into a store. It lets me in. I can purchase. But let's say I leave my zone 777. I go over to 841, and I try to walk in the store.
Wow.
Is that what you're saying? I can't. I could be limited there.
It's going to have to be approved, and the reason why is because they segment these portions. It's in the software segmented, so they can control each. It's almost like the lifestyle of each zone. Right? Each person is going to have a carbon footprint. Everything you buy and everything you throw away, everything you use is going to be part of your carbon footprint. You, the individual, if your carbon footprint goes over a certain amount, that you won't be able to buy what you think you're going to buy.
Wow.
You just won't be. So this is a control of resources.
Yes.
Right? You have to, if the world was going to change in a not so good way and you had to get people through this rough season, right? How would you do that? Well, you got to start saving on food. You got to start saving on supplies and everything else right now. In our case, it's the farms. It's the milk, it's the wheat, things like that. You have to save. And so you have to control who buys what. That means your weight's going to be a factor. How old you are is going to be a factor. Your health is going to be a factor. All these things are going to be a factor. And it's not going to be a doctor in control. It's not going to be a governor in control. It's going to be a system in control.
Yeah, AI or a system. Let me ask you this question. It sounds like a little bit like rationing, or in other words, what I mean by that, you're allowed so many you're allowed so much carbon use a month, let's say. And if once you get past your carbon, your allotment, you can't buy anything else. Like the system shuts you up. Yeah, that is citizen containment. Not only containing people in location, but this is a containment of medical supplies, food, water, everything that they do is going to be tied to a carbon credits or carbon footprint.
Yep. And your social score is a big part of that. We will not have hackers. Then once they get the system in place, right, you'd be surprised how fast people are going to get used to it.
Are they going to like it at first or no?
Yeah, they will. No, they're going to think it's strange at first, but I can tell you what, as they go into it, give them a month and they'll love the system. They will. They'll love it. They'll love it because they're going to find out that they have a bigger variety of things that they can actually do without worrying about somebody, harming them or something else. By the way, this goes with security parameters will be in place to handle people who don't quite comply with the system, right? All of this goes online, the security parameters within every single country, they go online at the same time. But here's my question. How do they get people to go this route in the first place.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Something has to happen in the world. Something has to happen first. And
Drastic.
the first things that has to happen, Pastor Paul, is we have to be, I'm talking about citizens. As a citizen, we're going to have to be sick and tired of hackers. How do you get people sick and tired of hackers to where they would actually say, yes, give us this system that
How do you
do that?
Well,
How do you do that?
if they get robbed enough, you got enough people getting hacked, they finally they're screaming for something different.
Here's what I believe will happen.
Okay.
Like the USA. Imagine the USA shut down for a week, and I mean a total solid week. And when I say shut down, I mean shut down. Shut down. Nobody's doing anything, right? And not a thing. And imagine after that week, right? They tell you it's going to be 28 days until they get everything back on par. And then imagine after that, they put in the new security parameters. And they say, look, guys, if you don't want this happening again, we put together this system.
Wow.
Because I'll tell you something, if it hurts enough, people will say, you got to do something. Now, I've seen that happen in the U.S. so many times. People will say, no, I'm not going to be compliant with this, that, and the other. And as soon as it causes them discomfort, as soon as it removes their comfort, what they can eat and the freedom of their children, they're saying, no, give us something better. And we can go ahead and deal with this, right? People are going to be tired of hackers, which means, and I'll say this bluntly, something is going to happen in the countries. It's going to hurt everybody. Everybody. That's the warning. If I give a warning this year, that's a good one. Something is going to happen, and it's going to be very damaging, and it's going to be due to hackers. That's what's going to happen.
Wow. Hackers could do a lot of things. They could set off nuclear.
They're going to shut us down. We're going to go dark. That's what's going to happen. That means at nighttime, no lights. No lights.
No air.
The little generators, like what's that one company? The Generac or whatever it is, something like that, right? That company's systems won't be able to transpond with some of the control modules that they have in place. Nothing. People's lights will not turn on because they are remotely controlled now. Nothing. Like if you don't pay your bill with the electric company, the computer shuts your power off.
Yeah.
As soon as you pay the bill, it turns right back on as soon as it's processed.
Right.
If that gets hacked, you get no power. Doesn't matter if your bill is paid or not. Water, it's the same way. Just imagine. Now, after going through, if anybody has had a power outage for about 7 to 14 days, you get tired after that 14th day. And if you see somebody else's lights on 2 blocks over and your lights are still out, I've seen people, they are just intolerant. These are intolerant folks. Yeah, they're livid. And so when you get a whole society like that, yes, people are going to say, do something to fix this. And because it's going to be an external problem, it's going to cause a type of unity within every country that's affected. So you're looking at the UK, they're going to be affected. The USA is going to be affected.
Diane, they cut the power for 28 days. The world will run amok. It won't be the same world when they log back on, I can tell you that.
Most certainly Germany is going to be affected. Parts of Russia are going to be affected. Don't think they're going to be an outcast. They're not. They're going to be affected too. Parts of the Middle East, that's going to be the issue, is the Middle East. And we're just going to see, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. So if I
Is it being orchestrated? Is it being orchestrated? Or is it?
Well, I couldn't forecast this, right? If it weren't such a good plan, right? There's no way I could forecast this with any detail if it were not.
I mean, you've amazingly forecasted. You've amazingly forecasted things that I thought was natural events, but because you forecasted it and it happened, I knew then it was man manipulated events. And so it's. I'm not talking from weather to pandemics or plandemics. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Well, this one's going to hurt. If you think COVID-19 was bad, this one's going to hurt.
Are we talking about another pandemic here?
No, this is a simple power outage.
A power outage. Let me just say something. If the power goes out tonight in Chicago or New York City, In 3 days, there's going to be dead bodies. 4 days, a week.
Mhm.
Because first of all, they can't get water. They come down out of these skyscrapers and they start scavenging into the retail stores. Nobody has,
Right.
nothing works. So they're going to loot and rob and look and search and take. And it's going to be chaos in 7 days in a city like New York or
Yeah.
Chicago in the
Yeah.
summer, in this heat. People will die in 7 days without water.
Think about 30. Think about 30.
Then I would predict 30 million people would be dead out of three. That's 10% of the U.S. population would die in 30 days.
You know,
It sounds crazy, but am I about right? Am I right?
Paul, something that's on the lenient side, right? It really is.
Oh,
because if people are thinking about fuel, the fuel pumps will not work.
They won't work
without power.
Nope.
They're just not going to work without power.
What about all the
Cars are not
refrigeration?
gonna work without power.
What about all the food, all the meat, all the
It's going to be gone.
refrigeration?
It's going to be
Right.
gone.
Then what?
You're not going to have that. You're not going to have that. It's going to be gone. So it's almost like that's almost like a global catastrophe. If we were just out of power, now watch. Listen, everybody, listen. That means you're going to hear these warnings on television about the problems that are about to happen. You're going to hear about it. You're going to hear the president speak and say, we need to prepare ourselves for this or for that, for cyber attacks. You're going to hear it. You're going to hear it. You're going to hear the VP come right behind him. You're going to hear a campaign about this. You're going to start hearing it.
Is it going to be?
It's going to be concrete and solid.
So they're going to start saying to us, guys, we're sorry, we got to let you know, but the hackers have, and there's going to be assaults on our systems. We need to let you know this. So in other words, they're going to start warning us in advance that we're going to get hacked and whacked.
Yeah.
In reality, it's a master plan being.
It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be everywhere.
Okay.
It's going to be everywhere. And during that time, though, listen what will happen. All systems, all the little systems, everything they want to do is going to be set up during that time, because that will put people in duress, and they'll do anything at that point to get their services back. Right? It'll be like Christmas Day. And if anybody knows what I'm talking about, when you've been without power for 7 days, when it turns back on, it's like Christmas time. It's like a birthday. Right. And so this is what we're looking at. That it's, the warnings are going to go out. So people, it's just one of those things. Of course, the Lord will carry us through. Right. We just have to be astute, right? We can't be deniers all the time. And when it does take place, right? I have a firm belief that God will guide people, but we just have to listen, Pastor Paul. We can't be. These people are serious about what they do. And the moment you think they can't do something worse, poof, something happens. Now, is it going to be an intentional planned thing? They're certainly gearing up for it to happen. But who will be the culprits in this? Well, we're
Patsy.
At war. Are we not?
Yes.
We have hackers in China. We have hackers in Russia.
Yes.
We have a situation with Taiwan. We have a situation with Moscow and Ukraine.
Yep.
We have a situation boiling in the Middle East.
Yep.
We have problems in Germany, right?
Yes.
And so, but everybody is talking about switching over to these digital systems, but they're not talking about the hackers. It will come suddenly. It'll come suddenly. If we have some sort of catastrophe prior to that plan, they probably won't need to do that. But you better believe we're going to have hackers that take out serious places,
power grids,
serious places,
internet connections, all that. So transport, cell phone. All cell phones, satellite.
The cell phones are
right.
Now, I will say this. The cell phones are redundant by way of satellites. Well, unless you believe in the flat Earth, there are no satellites, but they're redundant because of satellites. Because you have these 5G towers,
right? And
then every I think it's every 10th or 15th tower, or something like that, they have satellite communications. So these new connections are essentially a big distributed satellite phone system. Is what they are.
Okay.
And so that's somewhat redundant. But as far as internet, your basic internet, no. Your telephone communications is going to be only for people in certain areas. And again, they wanted all military bases to be off the grid by 2021.
So that they can operate autonomously without part of the public.
And look what's happened since that deadline. Look what's happened. we have been on a decline, a steady decline. We truly have been. And now we have these other issues that are starting to,
Cat, you're making it
get
wrong.
us. So anyway, that's something to be aware of.
So as
Because it
Christian,
will-
so as Christians, it's good that we get these warnings. I mean, Jesus gave us these warnings. Of course, we read them and we think that's for someone else, or that's these people coming down the road, down the line, But when it starts to happen, and you're still here, folks, and you will still be here, then you're going to say, "Wow, I should have been listening closer to what Pastor Paul and Mike were saying and others. I should have been reading my Bible a little closer. I should have not blew this all off." Because see, you need to know, first of all, you got to know what's coming, and then you got to know how you handle it by faith. And God will give you supernatural wisdom. He'll give you direction. But we got to start listening now, don't we, Mike?
Yeah, and he will do that. It's unfortunate, Pastor Paul, that same thing happened in World War I, World War II, happened in the Vietnam War, Korean War, and every single war and conflict that we've been in, people said, "Oh, it'll never happen."
I know.
Right? But it did happen, and nobody went anywhere yet. So one of the biggest things is, my advice to anybody like that, because somebody asked me that lately, and I said, let the Lord deliver you when he's ready to deliver you. You don't want to come out of the oven early because you're not good to, you won't be good for paradise, right?
No.
You'll be undone. There's something, we're here because something is not finished.
You won't been through the refiner's fire, right? I mean,
Right, that's right. The Lord he has perfect timing. But in the meanwhile, determine yourself to go through this day with the Lord.
So it sounds like to me that we got a binary system coming that's going to rock this world, and we have governments of the world making preparations for that period, and while they're making these preparations, they're also implementing other agendas, and it seems like those agendas are wicked, they're blasphemous.
They're not. Yeah, they're not good. Pastor Paul, this world is degraded. You know what? There's not one place on this earth that celebrates Christ. Who is lifting up Christ? Who is doing that? I mean, in the public's eye, on a daily basis, it seems like this entire war, don't get me started, it's against Christ.
Amen.
They keep all the other stuff in there. They can say God all they want. They don't identify with Yahshua HaMashiach. They're not talking about the God that I know.
Nope.
And but that's what it's all against. And everything about the faith of us. Right? People, they can examine themselves. Are they not under supernatural assault? They get their bill at the wrong time, right? People make mistakes on their accounts, not their neighbors, just them, right? So these supernatural assaults coming spiritually and through minions or people who are willing to work with these principalities and powers. The stuff is coming like that, like that family right, that had the encounter.
Yeah, let's talk.
And I said, my heart goes out to them.
Yeah.
Not good, not a good position.
No, they had to hire an attorney. They've had so many people coming and flying drones over their house and coming on their property, and also they're getting threats.
Yes.
Because they're saying you people are nuts, or you're this and that. You don't put that kind of fear on us. But Mike, I think you're the one who told us that there was as many as 28 witnesses on this.
Yeah, there were a lot of witnesses, and people are sick. People have something akin to radiation poisoning
from this.
That's right. So how in the world can people around them get radiation poisoning, but nothing happened? Come on. And I'm telling you, it's going to happen again. It will happen again and again and again. It's going to continue to happen.
Well, our next webinar coming up, August the 4th, is we've decided we're going to call it Aliens Above and Below. So in other words,
below is a good one.
That's a good one. I know you would be there. You'd be all over that below.
It's a Leviathan kingdom right there.
Whoa. Talk to us about that. Whoa. What do you mean? I know Leviathan is in the Bible. I mean, Job.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, yeah. So that means there's sea creatures, there's
underground. Hey, Shorty, good to see you, brother.
Entities.
A kingdom.
Tell us about this.
Kingdom. Leviathan kingdom.
I'm writing that down.
Well, think of Leviathan and Behemoth, right? But Behemoth was on the land. Leviathan was on the sea. And then when you read these, like Enoch and Baruch and Esdras, you start hearing these names. Even in the Old Testament, that fiery, that serpent. All of them are likened unto a serpent, but they're very specific. Right?
Yes, yes.
In today's world, you hear even people that are demonologists, they run into some people who would say that whatever inhabited them was Leviathan. Not that Leviathan is an individual. It's more like it's a kingdom.
It's a kingdom.
Right?
Yeah.
It is a kingdom, but it's a kingdom that's not given full authorization to mess with everybody else. Right? So that means governments would be highly aware of this kingdom, not coming from space, but right there in the ocean.
Right.
Correct?
From below.
This kingdom is being replicated on the surface of the earth through people. It's so funny because when people see UFOs leave, right, most people will report that they see them go right into the water, especially people in California.
Yeah.
People need water.
Oh, yeah.
And the Navy reports that most of the UFOs have come from the water, right? They come from the water, and they shoot right out into the upper atmospheres. And so, and of course, that happening in Genoa, where some things came up, but they said it wasn't time yet. They all went back in. We're talking about a long time ago. This happened twice. So lots of things are happening in the ocean. Pilots are saying that the ocean is lit up like cities, and then all of a sudden they go out.
Yeah. So you can see on the screen. I think you can see it now, Mike. I blew it up, but that's a ball.
Yeah.
Perfect sphere. It's a exotic metal. They found 50 of these in an area where they thought they saw a meteorite crash into the Pacific Ocean. There's a Harvard professor by the name of Avi Loeb who heads up this Galileo project, they call it. And they spent 2 weeks in the Pacific Ocean and knew right where to go to find where this thing crashed or went in. And when they went down to the bottom of the ocean there, they pulled up 50 perfectly round spheres
Bobby, good to see you,
of
mate.
exotic metal that's not from this world.
Right.
Now, I'm just going to ask, could a meteorite crashing blow up and cause 50 perfect little balls, or are we dealing with something else?
Okay, have you ever seen the oil dripped in the water?
Yes.
Notice how it shapes itself into a sphere.
Yes,
right?
It does.
Okay, so if you had an object that kind of came apart at a very deep level, very tiny level, right? It would assimilate based on that heat into
Oh
bonds.
man, what a typo!
It could do that, but it would have to be a very exotic material.
I said, Di's been with me from the start, and it said, Di says room from the start. Good on you, typo.
Thing in between mercury and potentially lead for something like that to happen. They have to be mixed with pure iron, maybe some pure zinc, maybe some carbides or something like that. So yeah, it could happen. But here's the unfortunate part. Why did he touch those things? Right?
He was holding them.
Let them alone. Here's the bad part.
Yeah.
Most of these encounters, right? This is something you may not know. Most people see these. They report these spheres, right? Well, there have been thousands of incidences with all armies of the earth over time where these spheres have been followed into jungles and they've been followed into forests, right? Where they would solidify and end up being something about the size of a softball, a metal ball, right?
Okay.
And there are lots of cases where scientists have studied the
Diane, they used them reporters and then sacked them when they got everything they could out of them.
things, and they turned back into a radiant sphere again, then just took off, right? So if he's doing his homework, he knows that's not safe to do. That's not some Christmas find. He didn't know what that, we gotta stop touching things, right?
He was holding them in his hand. He was on the boat.
We gotta stop doing that.
Yeah.
We gotta stop doing that. Would you touch the devil's pitchfork?
No.
And I know people are pure scientists and they don't believe in Christ, and so they don't like that comment. But I wouldn't touch the devil's pitchfork either. It's defiled. When people handle this stuff, right? They don't know what transference is taking place. It's a known fact. And half your audience knows this. They may not admit it, but they know this. When they have their little encounters that they can't explain, especially at night, there's an impartation of abilities that they'll get every single time. They may have a heightened awareness of what people are thinking around them and be deadly accurate. They may have, they can foresee things before they ever take place. They can know things about people that they shouldn't know. And so that these spheres, some of these spheres, like authentic spheres, that thing is not dead. That's more like a portal, a handheld portal, a device, right? Something that they're doing at CERN that ends up the exact same way as a sphere, right? Something they do at CERN. CERN has produced spheres already, right? Spheres that were metal and kind of went away after about 48 hours.
So that's the,
So
so
you
when
don't
you
wanna
say
play
these,
with that stuff.
so when you say when they take these protons and they collide them at the speed of light, they create these little particles. They could be creating exotic particles or
Oh, they
spheres.
have created. They've had a breakthrough in the last 3 weeks, I'll say. It started with beauty quartz. Anyway, make a long story short, they have identified properties of real portals, right? We're talking about the dimensional gateways as the best way a person can
Are you serious?
perceive it. But these guys have found this, right? They've found it. They found the mathematics behind it. And you better believe they're calibrating everything, right, to go to the next step, which is further. Because they have antimatter. That's an extraction.
I know that. Yeah.
But see, antimatter is an extraction from another dimension, essentially. Dark matter does not reside in our dimension.
No.
We have a shadow or fingerprint of dark matter, which makes it look like it's in between everything else, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is, you put your hand right through dark matter and nothing happens. Why? Because it's in another dimension. You have to see dark matter in a very curious way. So they have found a way to extract it. The mathematics has begun to extract it. It's only a matter of time before they crack the seal on a few things, right?
Wow.
They're natural. You know, people are going to find out they're natural seals in the earth, right? In different places of the earth, natural seals.
Well, the Bible talks about wells, okay?
Yeah.
Portals.
Yeah.
So you're saying at CERN, they're figuring out how to pierce the veil.
I just tried to find it. I'm going to try and look again. So hang on.
How to?
What's his name?
They're just about ready to go into the next dimension. Can they do it?
I think they've done it already. I think they've done that already, right?
Okay.
But here's the problem. It's one thing to open a portal and go in that portal. Well, big deal. That doesn't do anything. They need to be able to extract something from that portal, right? Something
into this
from
dimension.
That world here and hold it here instead of accumulating antimatter, which is very dangerous. That's extremely dangerous, by the way. But if they do this, one with quantum computing, for example, you could say a 1 inch by 1 inch square, could power the Earth for about 900 years if you could extract it from that other dimension.
In other words,
right?
it's way past Tesla. It's way past pulling energy from the air.
Yeah.
It's an exotic energy that's in another dimension. If you could pull that into this dimension,
right? And they have already tested this and used this. They have powered things from something as small as an atom. We're not talking about anything that generates heat. It's kind of like if you put helium-3 in a nuclear reactor that just exploded, right? It nullifies radiation. Helium-3 does. And so, if you could extract this matter, the potential is it's just beyond belief. And when you're talking about forget about cold fusion.
Yeah.
You have a different type of material to sustain.
Cactus, I can't find it. It's not there. I tried to look twice. I can't find it. Sorry.
Reaction from that open door. It's nothing more than, to them, it's mathematics. It is utilizing particles from this realm tied, as a super tension, I believe it's called, from this realm to the other realm.
Yeah.
And they already have identified that. So things are happening, the mathematics and all the science is there. And these guys are excited. So they found a few things. They had a major breakthrough at CERN.
Well, it still blows my mind, the fact that you could split an atom. Okay. I'm just being honest. I know that was, Einstein, and we're talking a long time ago. I'm just a country preacher from the cornfields of Indiana. Okay. Split an atom. What? So you're saying we're past that? We're going way past that.
Yeah, they don't want the matter that makes up the atom. How about that? if you can take an atom, which nothing has a natural force to break, right? As a powerful force to break.
Yeah.
To split an atom takes an unbelievable amount of energy.
Yeah.
Right. And so they focus that energy where the purposed explosion is split one. Once you split one atom, it releases enough power to split more atoms. And it causes a chain reaction that becomes this huge explosion, right? So imagine if you could convert all that to a controlled power source or a controlled, well, just a power source.
Yeah.
If you had that as just a power source, weapon wise, nobody would be able to defeat you because you could actually make something akin to a diode laser, right? That nothing would have the ability to stop. You can also fracture time for an individual. And if you fracture time to an individual, like they have done to some of the sheets that they use, they put sheets near the LHC, and when they collect materials on the sheets, they're watching the time intervals between the collection of one sheet to another, and they notice differences in the time. If you do that to a person, you can essentially disassemble a person just like that. That means vaporize a person, take them apart, but vaporize in a non-destructive way, meaning you cause all the materials in their body, right, to come apart instantly. So they become part of existence, and that's it. Can you imagine a person who's disassembled from something as small as a AAA battery?
No,
right?
That's just
okay.
Yeah, it's just...
And can you imagine if anybody stood in line with that? It would do it to everybody in that line. You're talking about something that would not diffuse, except it hit a vacuum, which is space or something like that. This is what you're talking about. If they have that type of technology, they're going to have it.
No, they believe it. They understand what it is. They're trying to figure out how to harness it.
Yeah, they're going to get it. I believe that at a specific time, they will. It's funny. The breakthroughs at CERN are always timed to these major milestones of advancement of humanity, like technology, war, and immorality. You know, the more immoral the world gets, the more breakthroughs these places have.
Can I just speak to that idiot? Paul, I see you're afraid to come to light because you got back. No, I never. Can somebody remove that idiot, please? Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
Expected. It's expected.
Okay. So,
can I tell you a funny story?
Please.
Real quick. I was listening, right? This guy was listening to Mike from around the world.
Okay.
And I was behind him.
Oh, you mean standing? You were standing behind him?
I was standing behind him. He was talking trash. He was talking so much trash. And I was right behind him. I was about a person behind him. I said, I can't believe this guy's talking trash. You know how bad I wanted to go up to that person and say, hey, give him a break.
Yeah. But if you had, he'd have heard your voice and he'd have known, oh my God, this is my... Well, let me ask you a question, Mike, because everybody, how many times people have asked me, who's Mike from the world? Do you know who anything about that? I said, look, I promised this man that I would never reveal who he is or where he lives or anything. And
time will permit.
And I never will. Time will permit. And people ask me, when is it going to happen? When will he ever do it? Mike, when the time comes, can you let me know, and we could set up a meeting?
You'll be the first to know, Pascal. You know what? I don't engage with anybody else on
I know you
don't.
Internet. I know you don't.
Your ministry is awesome, and Angela, of course, with Ring of Fire, and of course, on COT. But I don't really engage. I can't do that, Pascal, because the internet is saturated with all this information, and I know what's about to happen. And once these things take place, people will refine their messages, right? And they're going to need somebody who's not, they're going to need some folks who have experience in certain areas. I don't have experience in every area, but I've been exposed to some very exotic things in one specific area. And so I'm going to do my best to assist people when that time comes.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that you trust me and trust our ministry, and that I trust you and your ministry and what you're doing. And I really, this was God set this up. Well, you had the vision about me before you ever met me. So
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I did.
And Mike, you really bring great information that helps us. And I know you can't spell it out exactly. You would love to, but you can only go so far. But you give us enough. A lot of times you give us just enough that we can then start to put the pieces together and then we start to understand, and then we see things happen that you say were going to happen, and then they start happening. You say, "Wow,
Yeah.
you know, this is we are learning." And I know the intent is to help people find their way to Jesus Christ, to find how to get right with God and how to really have the Lord in their heart. That's amazing.
Because he's got it, Pastor. Listen, there's nothing that could ever happen or that will ever happen. God did not allow, sanction, or permit. He's already got us. He's got us covered.
Amen.
You know, like that one scripture that says, it's talking about joy comes in the morning, but after you had that moment in the night. Well, night is only a few hours, and then the morning comes and you're free. Meaning, just like the Lord said, that he would deliver everybody who has come to him. If we come to Christ, it's because God gave us to Christ. We cannot be lost. We're being raised. There's a difference. But you have a lot of people in this earth who run these cultic places. And they get mad if you don't believe the way they believe, or
right.
They can't let you go, and they have to create targets. They essentially do what Satan does. Satan has to have a target, right?
Yeah.
He's the accuser of the brethren, and so these people that follow him are the same way. In our case, this information that we're giving, a lot of people write and they say, you know what, if I didn't know this beforehand, I would have been kind of scared at so and so. And it takes the fear out of these events that are taking place. It may give a person a moment to pause, but it takes the fear out. And so a lot of people find comfort that somebody knew something about it and that they handle it differently when it actually happens. But it's really about to escalate. In truth, we haven't seen too much yet. We're about to see a lot. We're in a very different
Sounds
season.
like that the next 6 months things are gonna really change. We're gonna see serious changes.
You know what I would say. I think it'll happen this year, but we're gonna have an absolute change in how we even see reality. We're gonna have that. It's gonna make that big of a difference. For example, if people looked up, and one day if they looked up, say it was 2 months from now, they look up in the skies and they see that the stars are missing or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Or they see something is headed for us.
Yeah.
And the whole earth is scared. We'll see at that point, it's very difficult to explain to people what has happened. And people are going to be saying everything.
What will the media do at that point? Will they try to just blow it off, or will there be a
No, they can't blow it off. They won't be able to blow
what
off.
What are they going to do? I mean,
see it every single day.
Yeah, the whole world will see it every single day. Everybody see it.
They'll do like they normally do. They'll not talk about it, right? They'll not say anything about it. Just
Tricky, leave me out of it because he said ugly.
Like the oceans.
Yeah.
Ever been. They even take down. They decrease the temperature before they put it out to the public. The oceans are so hot. We're going to see spontaneous hurricanes form right off the coastlines. Right, not from a distance, but right off the coast.
Wow,
we're starting to see those type factors.
Well, I just checked.
People will see that.
This is what they're reporting, that the Atlantic Ocean is right now 2 to 3 degrees warmer than ever in history for this time of year, and up over on the coast of the UK and up in Europe, the ocean is 9 degrees warmer than ever this time of year. 9. I don't know how that can happen. I mean, that's outrageous. That's going to change.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is. Alaska, Greenland, right? All these different places that the ocean waters are normally warm. They're changing. Everything is changing in the ocean. Everything is changing, and we're about to go through this volcano season, right? Where we have a lot of eruptions. But right now we see what's happening as a consequence of bodies moving closer to Earth. Our sun is changing. Right now, what we see is the sun changes.
Yes.
So will the Earth. And the sun is about to go through a drastic set of changes, right? So the Earth will follow suit. We're intimately tied to everything that happens on the sun.
Yeah.
But when we're kind of shifted a bit too far, we won't really notice it by way of wobbling, us wobbling. We're going to be normal, but the sky is going to be out of position at that point. We're going to have spontaneous storms we've not experienced before. And even in the Bible, it says the seas and the waves roaring, right?
Yeah.
And do you not know that even in the modeling, what we see happening are storms building up so vast, so powerful, so strong that wind speeds, you know, at that point, we talked about this before, they will be able to support very heavy hail, right?
Wow.
You're talking about wind speeds in excess of near 200 miles an hour. That force just naturally. In a few hours, derechos will start forming in the USA, right? They're going to experience that through those high winds, and it's triggered from this heat. Well, that heat's about to increase more than what it is right now because Canada's fires, they're having more fires.
I know.
Start up there. And Mexico is burning. They're just burning up. South America's burning up. So we have these places that are burning up. We're about to get smoke from both directions. It's going to be pretty heavy. And we're very near to a pretty big eruption. Actually, it's 3 specific places that will likely erupt. When this happens, we're going to have to deal with the ash, right? So our environmental conditions are about to change.
Now, I know Tonga, which had that huge explosion last year, and all the way ash to space. But boy, there's been a lot of earthquakes around there. Do you think that they're going to go again, or?
Well, it's that thing is pretty big. I think it has 3 channels. So I think 3 channels. So you have a lot of magma building up again out of one of those channels. That won't flow through the others, right? So it will likely, you know, something near that will happen again. But we're going to see that in the oceans, in the Pacific here shortly. We're going to see it in the Atlantic. We're going to see some dormant volcanoes up near Washington State going down to California. We're going to see those things start to wake up and rumble.
Yeah.
Mexico is going to be a big problem for us. And then, of course, you know, the USA alone has 190 volcanoes in it, right? The USA does.
I know. I mean, a bunch of California.
So those are going to start to go off. Right?
A bunch of California that are dormant. Yeah.
That's right. And the magma is building. Why is magma building? Because we have all these cosmic rays and solar winds are hitting the Earth. The Earth is absorbing everything the sun has and gives to it that's polarized to us. The Earth absorbs. It's like overcharging your cell phone. If you do that, if your charger did not, or your battery did not shut off the charge going into it, right, your phone will blow up within an hour because it's receiving too much charge.
Wow.
The Earth is receiving too much radiation. It's processing too much power. All that power has to go somewhere. It just can't stay in the middle of the Earth. And so it normally comes out by way of magma. Magma melts more and more, which means the crust of the Earth gets thinner and thinner at certain regions until magma breaches. I know everybody's worried about Yellowstone. People will see Yellowstone gradually flow out. That magma is going to come out of Yellowstone. It will. But the worst places are going to be Italy, Japan, you know, places like that. There's the Gulf region. It's on fire right now. They won't really share these stories. It caught on fire again. They're having too many fires come up from the bottom of the Gulf. Fires. You know how weird that looks? You're looking at the ocean, right?
Yeah.
You see a big fire ball in the middle of the ocean, and you see a bunch of vessels out there trying to put the fire out.
Is it gas? Is it because gas?
Gas in the Gulf.
Yeah.
Right, is igniting for some reason.
Wow.
Likely because of magma. If magma hits a natural gas, you know, one of those bubbles, right? You're talking about some serious explosions.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question because I've been worried about Louisiana. But ever since you said that, because you know there's so much like gas in these compartments. I lost the terminology. But if the magma rises and hits one of these, I mean, it could just blow. I mean, is that possible?
Yes, it is, and it's happened before. That's why they shut the gas off in Pennsylvania in certain parts, right? But listen, New York City, underneath New York, is a caldera bigger than Yellowstone.
That's insane.
Bigger than Yellowstone.
That's insane.
Now they sat there and lied to everybody. I mean, they just blatantly lied, saying, you know, this is take about 6 million years for this to ever breach the surface. They're already having heating problems of those underground systems because they have a degrading gas system. You know, all those gas lines that they have in New York. Are you kidding me? That was a major city, so you have a lot of gas lines coming into New York, and they have places where they have taps there too. But that essentially that entire city has an infrastructure underneath the ground that is unbelievably old. And it's, if that starts to fail, there's no way they can figure that out. They've already said there's no way they can figure that out, right? They're trying to repair the gas system. And they said there's no way they can get that whole thing repaired. It's too much, too old, too complex. And so there you are.
There will be issues. There will be issues.
Yep.
Sounds like we've got...
They're going to burn. I think 1,000%. It's going to be a matter of a little time, and New York will ignite. I think
1,000%.
Yeah, I think it will ignite. I think people are in trouble there.
Wow, the Big Apple could be scorched.
Yeah, burn apple.
Yeah,
but New York is dedicated to bail, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, they got it right on Wall Street. They got the bull right there for you.
And they bought his. His wife is on the way, isn't she?
Yeah, she's on the way.
Yeah, Bale's wife's on the way. They have the, all the little things they have set up for that. So
they've been setting up all these.
They can't worship Satan and expect, what are they expecting with this guy?
Wow, Mike. I got to go back and watch this again, okay? Because I need to go back and and rewrite my new notes and try to figure out what it was amazing. I appreciate you coming on and being honest with us. And look at this. They've already posted over at Eventbrite, I guess. Aliens above and below. And Mike says, yeah.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah. Okay. Mike, I appreciate you coming on being with us. Is there anything else you're going to drop on us before we can talk about next week?
Well, Pascal, fires, these people with fires, bad idea. So, people might want to get ready for that. In fact, there are certain states who are taking precautions of the next couple of days for fires. So keep that in mind, everybody. If you have electric companies preparing for it, if you have water companies and gas companies preparing for it, and emergency services preparing for it, then they suspect something. So be aware of that.
We will do that. And I appreciate you coming on and being with us tonight. It was very interesting and very eye-opening.
As usual.
And I'll keep looking up because I think we're going to see something soon.
Amen. Pascal, it's always an honor.
The honor is mine. Trust me. God bless you, brother.
God bless.
Amen.
Okay, where is it? I don't know how good this is. I haven't seen it yet. So first time watching as well.
Antarctica on a sailboat. Hello, my name is Brad Olson. I went down to Antarctica on a sailboat in 2019, and I'm here to tell you about some of the things I found down there and some of the great mysteries that I went to try to investigate, see if there was any validity to some of the claims of large motherships under the ice, pyramids poking through the ice, or antediluvian civilization. Also, the mystery of the black goo, which is, this backstory was the Falkland Wars was fought over the black goo. So we'll get into all that one by one. And thanks for being here on Super Soldier Talk. When I was researching my trip down to Antarctica, being a cartographer, map maker myself for some of the books that I write, I was poring over maps of Antarctica, both modern, charting out my voyage, and also ancient maps.
Wow.
And some of these ancient maps are very curious because they were drawn during the age of exploration. And on those maps, the continent of Antarctica is depicted Now, what's so interesting about that is the continent of Antarctica was not discovered until 1821, when the first whalers and sealers who had read the account of Captain Cook sailing around the continent, but never discovering it. But he wrote in his account of the Southern Ocean that it was rich in seal and whale life. And back then, oil blubber was the main component to be used with the oil lamps that were prevalent in 19th century Europe. So a lot of merchant marines headed down to the Southern Ocean as fortune seekers.
Okay, Cactus, see when you come back, mate.
Seals for their hides and whales for their blubber. And that's how the continent of Antarctica was discovered in this modern age. I would propose that humans have been down there and discovered it before then, but we'll just use this historical perspective and say that they first set foot in 1821. However, you have the Piri-Reis map of 1519, the Bache map, the Mercator map, which included the projection of a 3D planet for the first time on a two-dimensional map, all depicting Antarctica. And the Bache map is really interesting because it depicts Antarctica as two separate continents. And it wasn't until the whole continent was scanned and understood that indeed there is a channel between Western and Eastern Antarctica, suggesting that perhaps this Bache map had information of what Antarctica looked like before it was covered in ice. Similarly, the Piri-Reis map, which was only 2 decades after Columbus came to the New World, showing the entire South America outline, as well as Antarctica with some islands that are still as yet discovered. So when I went down there, we had the opportunity to go to a bunch of research stations, including the Palmer base. And when we were in the American Palmer station getting a tour, the head of the station, the chief, said, take a picture of that picture of an ice sheet. He said, that's right out in the bay there. In the 1980s, it was painted. And at that time, it was just one big ice shelf. So I took a picture of it. And then later when we got outside, he said, that's what it looks like today. And you could see an island with a big ice cap on it, but it was not visible in that painting from the 1980s. He said that just a few years earlier on Pi Day, which is in mid-March, the land bridge, the ice bridge connecting to the mainland had collapsed. And so for the very first time, they had discovered a new island down by the Palmer base, suggesting that there are still land masses that are trapped under the ice that are still as of yet discovered. So that was quite fascinating that we're still finding new land masses under the ice. And there are changes in the climate. I know a lot of people, myself included, think that there's an agenda behind climate change to get us all on carbon credit scores and to blame us for the changing weather. But something also is very interesting happening down in Antarctica. And one of the maps that I use in my presentation called The Hidden Anomalies of Antarctica was this map from NASA, which showed the continent where it was heating up, but also where it was cooling down. And this is really amazing because Mother Nature, in her infinite wisdom, is able to balance out the heating and the cooling. So that's why we don't have catastrophic flooding in our coastal communities. Because if Antarctica ice map were ever to melt, it would just be absolutely catastrophic for these coastal communities around the world. Of course, water seeks its own level. So if the Antarctica ice cap were to melt and slide off the continent, it would kind of be like having a cup of water and then filled up to the top and then putting ice into it. Of course, it would overflow. That would be the same thing. And on planet Earth, we essentially live on a water planet. And that is 71% of the surface area of the planet is covered with water. And of course, all the oceans interconnect at one point or another. So if one ocean were to rise, they would all rise. And that's why we haven't seen Miami Beach go underwater, nor anywhere else in a catastrophic way, because it just hasn't happened as predicted. So hopefully it never will, but the bellwether is to keep an eye on Antarctica, make sure that those ice caps don't melt and slide off.
Trust Diane to
One
find
of
it.
my
She's the best
colleagues
link girl.
On Antarctica research is Linda
Pay rise,
Moulton.
Di.
She started her career investigating calculations and has a very good reputation of interviewing whistleblowers who come to her and want to release their information through her platform called Earth Files. And Linda has gotten into whistleblowers coming back from Antarctica. The first, who I think is also the best, that she interviewed about 7-8 years ago is a gentleman named Brian S. He remains anonymous, hasn't shown his face in the interview, but he did show some photos of him during his operations. He was flying the big cargo planes all across Antarctica, mostly from McMurdo to the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station. And he had some stories to share with Linda about his years flying down there, including seeing silver discs over the Beardmore Glacier, which is in the Trans-Antarctic Mountain Range, and also having an emergency rescue of several scientists who were camping on the Rockefeller Plateau, funny name for all the locations down there, who were doing some research. And I can tell you from my experience, it can be extraordinarily cold and dangerous to be away from your camp more than a few hours. And certainly sleeping overnight on the ice can be absolutely deadly. So there were these scientists that went missing on the Rockefeller Plateau. Of course, they communicate with radio, and this whole group of a dozen or so scientists just dropped off the radar. So Brian S. and his team went out looking for them, found the camp, no sign of anybody, and had to fly back to McMurdo and just say we couldn't find them. Suddenly, about a week later, they get a crackling message over the radio that we're here and we need a pickup immediately. And of course, they went out there and got them, and they were ashen-faced and wouldn't say a single thing. Hey, where were you guys? We're looking for you. You know, it's dangerous to go missing. Missing on the polar plateau, where presumably where the heck are you going to go? So without saying as much, it's presumed that they found some kind of entrance, perhaps into this inner world.
Tell us what it was, Shawnee.
Some kind of under ice base. And what they saw was absolutely terrifying, because not only would they not tell Brian S. and the crew where they were, but they went back to McMurdo. They were debriefed. They would not talk. They had to go back to New Zealand, and they were treated as if they had been exposed to something dangerous. So they had to go through several different protocols for making sure they weren't carrying some kind of deadly virus with them. So that was kind of peculiar, Brian S. thought. And then his big bombshell with Linda Moulton Howe was when they were tasked to go to the Australian Davis base from McMurdo, and they were ordered to fly around the big no-fly zone, which is just 1 degree off of South Pole. But because it was a life-death situation, they defied the orders and went directly towards the Davis base, saving themselves 20 minutes of fly time. And when they were flying over the no-fly zone, that's when they saw this giant, gaping, multi-mile across hole in the ice. Now, up on the polar plateau where the South Pole Station is located, it's over 2 miles up. So it's very high elevation. Antarctica is the highest elevation continent in the world because of this polar plateau. So a big, giant, gaping hole in the ice certainly caught their attention. And the one thing that I found was most peculiar about this description of the hole is that it also had a road going down into it, like a cat track road that they could drive a snowcat out of the McMurdo or the South Pole Station and go down into it. And so they went and did the emergency rescue at Davis Station. They were taking the person back to South Pole, and then they were going to go on to McMurdo, and they were going to fly over the hole and take another look at it again. And they were given very stern orders. Do not fly over that again. Do your course around the no-fly zone. And indeed, when they did get back to McMurdo, everyone in the crew was called into superior office. They were reprimanded. And just like a lot of people in the military who have had paranormal or UFO experiences, they were told, you didn't see what you just saw, and you're not allowed to talk about it. However, Brian S. never signed a non-disclosure. So years later, he felt it being necessary to get his story out there, and that's what he did. The other whistleblowers Linda Moulton Howe has had on her show is two gentlemen in special forces. They too preferred to be anonymous. They go by the name of Spartan 1 and Spartan 2. And they were up on the Beardmore Glacier. This seems to be a paranormal hotspot in Antarctica, where Brian S. saw silver discs flying over, but also where Spartan 1 and 2 said they encountered a large black basalt-like craft wedged in the ice somewhere, and they had a way to enter the craft, and it was mysteriously illuminated on the inside, and it was responsive to their touch. So they could touch a door and it would swing wide open. There were strange hieroglyphs on the wall that they couldn't identify as being Egyptian or anything else. And they were able to walk around this craft, for lack of a better term, and explore around. So I believe that this would have been one of the three large mothership-like craft that are said to be in the ice in Antarctica. And our intelligence agencies have known about them since the 1970s and actually gave them the nickname Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, which were the names of the three ships that Columbus sailed over on his original journey. I've been able to identify another one of those locations, and it happens to be in the New Schwabenland area of Antarctica that was claimed by the Nazis just before the start of World War II. And out in the field, up on the polar plateau, there's a base called the Conan Base. And I was really amazed when the GPS coordinates for this seasonal base, meaning they're only there for a couple months every summer, lined up with this Google Earth imagery of some kind of excavation under the ice of this Conan base. And this, I think, is the best evidence for one of those three motherships being under the ice. And I really love it when you can get different data points confirming the same story. And indeed, that is the case with the Conan base, because the Farsight Institute remote viewers use those GPS coordinates to locate this craft under the ice that had been excavated in 2013. And indeed, what they found was some kind of manufactured craft that also was built for very large, tall species. They feel that the Farsight Institute, when they remote viewed it, that it was not only a craft that has not been used in many years, but also had been built for some kind of non-human entity, a very tall alien species that were not present anymore, but the craft was still there. Another great mystery of Antarctica is what the landmass was like before it was covered in ice. And many explorers, even starting with the Scott Party to go to the South Pole, were finding fossils up above the Beardmore Glacier at a location called Mount Buckley. And the Scott Party of 5 members, they were just 35 days behind Raoul Amundsen to get there in the year 1911. And they were so despondent to find the Norwegian flag flying at the South Pole that these expeditions are planned out years in advance. And on the way back, they were collecting these fossil samples from Mount Buckley that they were going to take back to the Academy in the United Kingdom. And part of the reason that the Scott Party failed on the way back, and all 5 of them, all 5, including Captain Scott himself, perished on the Ross ice shelf, and their bodies remain to this day. They were just buried in the ice where they passed when a rescue party came and found them. And the samples that they took show Antarctica was once a tropical continent, not only with ferns and flora suggesting a jungle-like atmosphere, but also replete with dinosaurs that once existed in Antarctica. Some species of dinosaurs unique completely to Antarctica, meaning they're only found in the fossil records of Antarctica, showing that it had been once part of the giant landmass of Pangaea or Gondwana land and had broke off, because there are some parallels in the fossil record with Australia, with India, with Africa, that all those continents were once connected because the same animals were found in the fossil records there. So that's quite fascinating that Antarctica had once been a steamy jungle where now it's actually just a frozen landmass covered. 99% of the landmass is covered in ice. Antarctica is also the most volcanically active continent in the world, with 91 known active volcanoes. So with all that geothermal activity, you have the propensity for large under ice domes to exist with fairly temperate climates. You could live down there, in fact, where on the surface, it's very difficult to live. And that's why no humans ever lived in Antarctica, just because it would be so hard. And if you were under the ice, you would either have to have some kind of hydroponic method of growing your own food or having it shipped in. So only in this modern age could that be possible. Yet, it's also possible that you could have an extraterrestrial race down there, or these pre-Adamite, as they're known, species of human-like, not quite human, they were actually giants that perhaps came from Mars or other planets. And by coming here, they were in one of those 3 mothership craft that got stuck in Antarctica and actually had to live out their lives and perhaps finally perished in Antarctica, or perhaps survived. And this is why there's so much secret.
Yeah, Shawnee, I'll give you a spoiler alert. The red slippers represent Christ's blood, salvation. It's why the Wicked Witch of the West wants them so bad. Wicked Witch of the West, www equals 666, the Pope. So there's a spoiler alert for you.
See, with the continent, with these no-fly zones, with this hole in the ice, with the NSA, which was created in the 1940s, but wasn't even admitted to until the 1980s, and that's where it got the
Thanks, Tricky. Love you, bro.
No such agency for the National Security Agency, and they are tasked with all things extraterrestrial. So they're the ones at the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station protecting the no-fly zone, making sure nobody can go out there, calling back the planes, for example. And they're also tasked with anything such as a craft retrieval, such as alien bodies. The NSA is Johnny on the spot when it comes to a downed craft. They're the first ones there to cordon off the area, create a cover story if necessary, and to extract all the parts, personnel, bodies, and different craft to take back to some of our laboratories for backward engineering. So the NSA has a building in McMurdo Station, which is the largest research station in Antarctica run by the Americans. And there's an unmarked building in McMurdo that's run by the NSA, and nobody knows what's going on in there. Presumably, it's a big warehouse type building that when they do accumulate craft or bodies, what have you, to take back to America, that first they have to go through McMurdo and they can be stored in Antarctica before they can get them on one of those big cargo planes to fly back. So there's stories of these pre-Adamite giants living in Antarctica, and some of them have been found as bodies, but some of them are said to be awakening, coming out of a sleep-like state, stasis, and now ready to emerge back onto the planet. So this is an interesting ongoing story about how these giants are now awakening down in Antarctica and what they're going to do when they're fully awakened back. Yep. Our planet has these plates that are very fluid, as Brooks Agnew described them as cornflakes on top of a bowl of milk, that when the poles move, and indeed there is evidence that right now the magnetic South Pole and the magnetic North Pole are on the move.
It's true.
Like they've never been before. In fact, the magnetic South Pole is now off the continent and moving towards Australia.
Wow, the South Pole's not even on Antarctica anymore. It's in Australia. The magnet, oh, wow, that's heavy.
And so if this was an indication where the poles would shift in a 45-degree movement, which is very sudden, it only takes a couple of days, but of course would be absolutely catastrophic to all the life on the planet, because it would create tremendous earthquakes, the rising and falling of continents, volcanoes blowing off, tidal waves all over the planet, that it would reset the polar landscapes to be more over North America. So Canada would be the new North Pole, extending all the way down into the Pacific Northwest. Similarly, Australia would be the new southern South Pole. Then that would leave Antarctica in more of a temperate climate, and the ice would rapidly melt. We would finally be able to see what's really under the ice and could expose antediluvian civilization. There are some reports that there are excavations down there where they're finding not only some of these pre-Adamite giants, but they're located in megalithic structures, as well as finding megafauna, that is, woolly mammoths, large ice age mammals that also once existed in Antarctica, and maybe still does, because in the secret diary of Einstein, where he said he flew into the hole in the ice, which he discovered 18 years earlier as the first aviator to fly over the South Pole. Admiral Byrd, after the tragic loss during the Battle of High Jump, in Operation High Jump, was summoned to fly with just his radio man to the South Pole. And knowing that this gaping hole was there, large enough to accommodate his flying into the hole and then back out, was summoned into the inner earth, where while he was flying, the first thing they noticed was verdant green valleys and flowing creeks, saying to his radio man, this shouldn't exist. And then seeing something like an elephant, as they got closer, they did another double take, and indeed it was a woolly mammoth down there. And then while Admiral Byrd was still flying, two Flugelrads, or the UFOs of the Germans, came wingtip to wingtip, and he lost control of his plane. This is what he wrote about in his diary. And they took him down to this emerald-like city. I always use the example of the Wizard of Oz, of some fantastic-looking,
Always the Wizard of Oz. Always Oz.
crystal city under the ice, where Admiral Byrd was summoned to visit the master. And he noticed when his plane was taken down by remote control, out of his control, that the two UFO saucer crate ships had Nazi insignia on them. And when he got out of the ship, his plane, to go meet the master, that he noticed that the two pilots had German accents and were also had insignia on their uniforms, suggesting it was a variation of the Third Reich, probably the Fourth Reich. And this could be the New Berlin base that was prophesized in the early 1940s by Admiral Dolan, saying that we have created an impregnable fortress for the Fuhrer in a great area of frozen land, suggesting that this was Antarctica. But they wouldn't have been able to build this crystal city in just a few years when Operation High Jump, and Admiral Byrd was summoned to meet the master, who he said was of an otherworldly nature, could communicate with him telepathically, but they were able to speak in English. And the master was very concerned with the United States having just developed nuclear bomb technology at the Trinity site in White Sands, New Mexico, and then dropping bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan to end World War II. The master said, "We know that you're a very high-ranking and esteemed admiral in the U.S. government. We would like you to go back and warn your governments not to use nuclear weapons, that this has a ripple effect through the dimensional states that would affect them and other ET races." And of course, Admiral Byrd said he would. And when he was leaving Antarctica after Operation High Jump, he mentioned to one of the reporters who came on his ship when they were resupplying in Chile, and he said, and it was reported in the El Mercurio newspaper, that Admiral Byrd warned that we would be confronted with an enemy that would be able to fly pole to pole at incredible speeds, saying this in 1947, with a kind of technology that we still don't have disclosed to the world today, that could fly in one shot from pole to pole at incredible speeds. And when Admiral Byrd did get back to the Pentagon, he was not treated as a hero. He too went into quarantine and was reprimanded for making that statement, but also debriefed for many weeks before they finally let him go home to his family after Operation High Jump, finding everything they could about this inner Earth civilization, what kind of technology they had, and coming to the stark realization that the Germans had not lost World War II. In fact, the Third Reich, the political arm of Nazi Germany, never surrendered, nor did the SS, which was a secret society within and using the best of the best. It's estimated that up to 250,000 officers and SS personnel escaped Germany at the end of the war, using their large U-boat fleet to go down to their base 211 and their New Berlin base, where they were able to continue working on their backward engineered flying craft, which then was seen by Admiral Byrd on his expedition down there. So just more incredible testimony from a very high-ranking and decorated admiral someone who knew Antarctica better than any living human being on the planet, to write in his diary that he went into this inner Earth environment where there was some kind of heat source and ultraviolet rays that could grow plant and tree life underneath the polar plateau with flowing rivers in a temperate climate where woolly mammoths live. If it was anybody except for Admiral Byrd who was saying these things, probably nobody would take him too seriously, but his son was given the diary upon Admiral Byrd's death with instruction that Admiral Byrd would like to have this story told, and the son then published The Secret Diary of Admiral Byrd. So after World War II, the British had been spying on the Nazis down in Antarctica, called Operation Tamerlane. And I actually went to visit Port Lockroy, which was one of the spying stations, including another one down by the Vernansky base, which they donated to the Ukrainians, was originally a British spying station. And they were tasked with trying to intercept radio messages and spying on the New Schwabenland claim of Nazi Germany in the late 1930s, where they were detecting U-boat traffic continuing to bring down personnel and material. So after the war ended, there was a great exodus of the German U-boats. In fact, many of them still to this day have never been accounted for. They know that they were built and they had their code numbers on them, but have never resurfaced.
Yeah, me either.
So in a book by Henry Stevens called The Black Sun, he describes the final battle of World War II was actually out in the North Atlantic, and it was a resounding defeat of the Allied forces, because this was the Fuhrer's convoy. This was taking the most important personnel and equipment out of Nazi Germany at the very tail end of the war, including Adolf Hitler himself. The History Channel did a very remarkable documentary series called Hunting Hitler over 3 seasons and 35 episodes or so, going to these locations in South America, some of which I went to visit, but also touching on Antarctica as this refuge of the New Berlin base. So the Americans were tipped off by the British that the Nazis, some of the highest personnel, had escaped, and they were tasked with mounting an operation. It wasn't just the Americans, but other Allied countries all came together in Operation High Jump, 1946, 1947, supposedly as a scientific research mission, yet it was going down there as a military flotilla, replete with aircraft carriers, submarines, 33 aircraft, 4,600 trained military troops that appeared were ready for some kind of military engagement and landing on the continent to confront these Antarctica Nazis. And when they had all convened right around New Schwabenland offshore with this flotilla head by
Shawnee, when you watch it, leave a comment, because it's the only feedback I get, please, brother.
Admiral Byrd himself in a ship called the USS Mount Olympus. They were all there, and they had located some outbuildings in New Schwabenland at the base 211. They had done a little pitter-pat of bombing the day before, but then the day of the Battle of High Jump, Admiral Byrd had ordered his bombers to go out there and really carpet bomb the area. When those ships were approaching base 211, all of them just went bloop right off the screen. Those planes and those pilots and personnel have never been seen or heard from ever again. So that bombing sortie did not succeed. Great loss of life in those planes. But also on the same day, out where the armada of ships was, up out of the ocean came these flying craft, these UFO flying disc craft, to confront the armada of ships. And while they could have easily taken out the entire armada, they didn't. They just took out one ship called the USS Murdoch, and what could be described as a directed energy weapon or a very high powerful laser beam just sliced the ship in half, with, of course, great loss of life, because even if you jumped overboard in time before the ship sank very rapidly, you would die of hypothermia very quickly. The anti-aircraft weapons against these flying UFOs couldn't touch them. There was some kind of force field around these craft, and in a show of force, again, for Admiral Byrd to take back to his superiors at the Pentagon, don't mess with the Antarctica Nazi station because we have technology beyond your wildest dreams. And in fact, they did. So the last two battles of World War II were actually won by the Nazis, who then reformulated themselves as the Fourth Reich. And while the German fighting forces of the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe and the Navy did surrender on VE Day, the Fourth Reich became more of an intelligence and high-tech new form of government. And in Henry
Deep state,
Stevens'
in other
book,
words.
and also Joseph Farrell has done quite a bit of research on the Fourth Reich, called Nazi International, was his book. He was saying that this third force was fanning the flames of discontent between the Soviet bloc and the NATO bloc. And this is why we had the Cold War, because they were still operating behind the scenes and keeping those two superpowers at each other's throat, where all the while it was this intelligence force, this third force of the reformulated Nazis. And of course, James Rink has a lot of great information about the German secret space program, the Nachtwaffen, which is also the Dark Fleet, allied with the reptilian forces operating out of Antarctica. In fact, it's said that the base 211 was an old reptilian base that was just donated to the Nazis to use for their own purposes, which they did. So that's very interesting that you have reptilian, malevolent ET connection also going hand in hand. And who knows? It could have been reptilian craft that came up out of the water that confronted Admiral Byrd. Well, of course, the Americans didn't take that too well, losing two battles at the end of World War II. And of course, they were very keen on confronting those Nazis once again. But before they could, there was the famous flyover of Washington, D.C., of several craft, and it was on the newspaper cover around the country in 1952 of these crafts flying over the Capitol building, penetrating the most secretive and protective airspace in the world. And here you have a dozen or so craft flying right over the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. For a long time, everybody assumed that they were UFOs of an extraterrestrial nature. Now, most UFO researchers would agree those were the Antarctica Nazis flying pole to pole at incredible speeds to confront the United States and basically force surrender treaties. And this is now, according to new information from Laura Eisenhower, who's a great granddaughter of Dwight D. Eisenhower, that it was actually Truman who signed these surrender papers, and that Dwight D. Eisenhower just inherited a very bad deal. He was very upset with the military-industrial complex, as we know in his farewell speech, but he also threatened to take the First Army into Area 51 when he was denied access to that super secret compound in Nevada on the Nellis Air Force Base. That never happened. They worked out some kind of arrangement. But you can see at that point, things had started to go out of control. And these Fourth Reich Nazis had gained quite a bit of power and control within our American government. Of course, we know about Project Paperclip, where we were taking their scientists right out of Nazi Germany and putting them in high-ranking positions. And this is part of the neo-fascism problem that we have in this country today. And I would say it all traces back to this Fourth Reich Third Force that has been a player ever since the end of World War II. Operation High Jump ended 2 months into the 6-month campaign. That's always been a question about why Admiral Byrd ordered a retreat. Well, they were resoundingly defeated in the Battle of High Jump is one reason, but also because they knew that they had to come back with higher technology to finally confront the Nazis. Then you had, in the following years, another expedition in which Admiral Byrd went down there called Operation Deep Freeze. And this was not so much of a confrontation with two militaries, but more to try to root out some of the Nazi bases and get more intelligence on it. And in fact, the flyover of Washington, D.C. then happened in subsequent years, forcing this treaty on Truman, which was then adapted by the Eisenhower administration, much to his chagrin that he had to go along with it. Then there was the nuclear bomb testing, ostensibly to blow a hole in the upper atmosphere and test nuclear weapons down in the Southern Ocean, right in the area of New Schwabenland. And this was called Operation Argus. And in Operation Argus was, the cover story was they were doing nuclear bomb testing of the upper atmosphere in this alternative one to allow the pollution to escape. But in fact, they were nuking the Antarctic Nazis in 1958 as retaliation. By that time, most of the staff and personnel had left. They didn't really like it there. They were isolated from any outside viruses, because when you live in a sterile environment like Antarctica, where no viruses or bacteria can exist naturally, every time a supply ship would come or a U-boat with personnel from the outside, if just one person had the remnants of a cold, it would sweep through the whole Antarctica colony, and then everybody would get sick. So they were just kind of getting tired of being down there. So by the time of Operation Argus, they had moved almost all of the personnel and material to their secret base.
And Tricky, when they're done with him, they'll cast him aside. You watch what happens to Zelensky. They'll just cast him aside.
Bases in Chile and Argentina. And when I was going over the maps of my South America trip, before and after I went to Antarctica, I was discovering that there are huge land holdings in Chile and Argentina that act as micronations. That is, they are their own countries, in so much that they can operate independently, such as the Vatican City within the city of Rome, within the country of Italy, but it's its own micronation. And so the Germans had set this up pre-World War II, had started buying land holdings as well as financing corporations, because the money man, the number two under Hitler at the end of the war, was a man named Martin Bormann. He kept popping up all over South America in the 1950s, where they were building their Fourth Reich empire.
Okay, guys, I'm going to tell you, I know that's not true. They found Bormann's DNA, near a train station was getting out of Germany. So that's not true. Martin Bormann survived and went to Afghanistan. They found his bones and his DNA. So that's not true.
And this had been noticed by our intelligence forces, but some of them had started to come over to the side of the Fourth Reich. That's why the CIA was responsible for deposing democratically elected leaders and propping up others, such as Perón in Argentina, terrible fascist president of that country, and then Pinochet in Chile to depose a democratically elected leader there, putting in a fascist. So it's very interesting that Chile and Argentina are very closely connected for thousands of miles along the spine of the Andes Mountains. And when I was down in San Carlos de Bariloche in Patagonia, there was the Anelco house where in hunting Hitler, they had found the house and saw that it had stovepipes for an underground base there. They even went ashore and they found where the seaplane was located. So if the authorities were ever moving in on the Anelco house, they could get Martin Bormann and even Hitler himself onto the seaplane, fly out of the big lake there and cross the spine of the Andes Mountains and get into Chile and be safe at another safe house. So I do believe Hitler lived out his natural life in South America. It's said that he's buried underneath a hotel in the capital of Paraguay. Can't confirm that, but when I was down there, there was a big news story that somebody's cache of Nazi artifacts, some very valuable.
Tricky, I'm pretty sure Russia still has sodomy laws. I hope they do. I'm pretty sure they do.
And SS artifacts. It was a big news story when I was down there. Just thousands of items was discovered in somebody's private collection. And this could have only been collected with a large amount of personnel to have thousands of items down there. So many Nazi sympathizers in South America. In fact, it wasn't until the very end of the war that Chile and Argentina were pressured to join the Allies. Before then, they were very sympathetic to Nazi Germany. And indeed, I went to several locations, not only around Bariloche, which is just like a town out of southern Bavaria, Germany, but also another town called La Falda near some of the industrial hubs, including Cordoba, where the Nazis had set up several corporations. And now Argentina is kind of a basket case of a country, kind of like the way the Marcos family had stolen all the wealth from the Philippine government. But Argentina had the possibility, had the potential to be a real powerhouse economic force, but the kleptomaniacs in government stole all the resources, and that's not the case with Argentina today. 2 years before I went down to Antarctica on a sailboat for 26 days to the Palmer Peninsula and islands off of the Palmer Peninsula, a very curious thing happened. There's a lot of world leaders and royal family members, and even one of the Apollo 11 astronauts, Buzz Aldrin, were going down to Antarctica for unknown reasons. And they all happened to be in the same season, that is 2016 and 2017. You had King Carlos of Spain, an elderly man, and I can tell you it's not easy to travel down there. It's really difficult, in fact, and the weather and the climate is very harsh. So for these old men like Patriarch Kirill from Russia, also an elderly man, to go down to Antarctica, you kind of have to scratch your head and say, what are they really doing down there? And Buzz Aldrin made this cryptic tweet that he has seen the face of evil and that we're all in danger. And then that tweet quickly came down. But nonetheless, Buzz Aldrin had to be medically evacuated. He had some kind of health issue, and they had to get him out of there. So maybe he did see the face of evil, and maybe we are all in danger. You also had John Kerry, an acting Secretary of State, the highest ranking U.S. official, to go down to Antarctica on Election Day in 2016 when Trump beat Hillary Clinton. It's presumed that when John Kerry got to McMurdo, he went missing for several days, that he went to one of these under ice bases to get his marching orders. What are we going to do about this Trump guy, and how should we handle this? That the actual leaders of this interplanetary corporate conglomerate are based out of Antarctica, and John Kerry was going down there to find out what they wanted to do with this new president, Donald Trump, who had taken the office against all odds and certainly set them back quite a bit on their timeline as far as pushing forward this new world order agenda. So it was quite interesting that at that same time, Prince Harry was also going down there with some of his army buddies, but he was going to the South Pole to go cross-country skiing.
Yeah, Tricky, he's not really saying anything that's not known already, is he? And, you know, traveling around on a yacht, that don't sound right. So I might give him the sack. No, I haven't got time to watch a whole lot of that. Oh, man, it didn't load. Hang on, guys. Yeah, where was that one? Hang on.
Discover Puglia, Amalfi and the Mediterranean from $5,499 per person, including flights. Set off on this tour and cruise adventure and experience Italy, the Greek islands and more. Head to tripadeal.com.au.
With automated single-touch payroll, you can take your business to a new realm. Wait, new realm?
Do not adjust your television. What you are about to experience is stranger than fiction.
Hey there, strangers, and
yeah, Tricky, because if he was actually speaking what he saw, you look up. When you think about what you saw or what you did, you get a picture in your mind's eye up. You don't look down. When you look down, you're remembering something you read. So good body language pick up, brother.
welcome to Stranger Than Fiction. I am your co-host, Devin.
Hi, I'm Heidi.
And you are joining us as we explore episode 3 of Stranger Things season 1 called Holly Jolly.
Oh.
Yeah, a little double entendre with Holly and the Christmas lights. So if you are new to our podcast, we are the duo behind the YouTube channel Channeling Spirits, where we explore all things spooky and supernatural, but we also have been covering the first season of Stranger Things, going into the real life inspiration
in our podcast.
So we are on episode 3. Last episode, we did a brief little detour, and we did our top 10 scariest films. But now we are back checking out episode 3. And I did want to just do like a brief little aside. So on episode 19, I believe, maybe it was 18, we were talking about Lonnie Byers, the father of Will and Jonathan, and that actor who is Ross Partridge. And we were talking about how in The Lost World, he plays a character called Curious Man. And we were curious on who that was. Since we recorded that, we actually happened to watch The Lost World.
Not like just coincidentally, because that's
Okay, I'm not sure about that, guys.
Been nothing short of historical and totally groundbreaking, featuring the brand new documentary series called Angels and Giants, The Watchers, and the Nephilim.
Okay, it's
Before we dive
clear, and I'm
into
going to change the
today's
glare,
final
guys.
panel on the discussion, watch this short excerpt.
This is Casa de Armas in Cusco, Peru. This is the region where the strongest evidence for the presence of the Watchers and the Nephilim on Earth can be found. And this is probably the largest megalithic wall in the world. The Inca found this site, so they decided to build here. When the Spanish first arrived, they were completely blown away. And they said, "Did you build this?" And the Inca said, "No, this was here when we got here." This is the biggest, 125 tons. Are you capable of meeting with the Watchers, the Guardians?
In our culture, from the fifth level of consciousness and higher, it is like having an afternoon meeting.
Rabbit ears on a cat figure, which represents the Son of God, Horus. You have the Tree of Light with the snake, so it's one of the chaos creatures coming out or through the Tree of Life. What the Son of God is doing is he is crushing the head of the serpent and then slicing it off. What it says in the hieroglyphs above here, he will strike your heel, but you will crush his head. This pyramid is 2.3 million blocks, the smallest of which is 2.5 tons. The biggest ones, the bigger ones, are 15 tons. These nodules we also saw in Peru. And how can there be nodules here and the same exact type of architecture literally halfway across the world in Peru? Very separate civilizations, same technology. Why?
Welcome back to Skywatch TV. I'm Jordis Horn. What you watched, ladies and gentlemen, was just a small snapshot of what is a part of a much bigger body of work in Angels and Giants, The Watchers and the Nephilim, and of course the companion DVD, Angels and Giants Illuminated, two giant bodies of work. And they really needed to be in order to make up this massive docuseries. But before we get into today's discussion, let me introduce who's in house. He's a television and documentary film producer who's worked with countless media outlets like Fox, MTV, CBS, and more. His works include Gentle Grace with Kathy Lee Gifford, Jesus, The Search Continues with John Ankerberg, and the legendary Apocalypsis, The Final Warning docuseries on Inspiration TV. Please help me welcome Mr. Rudy Landa. He's the author of the best-selling titles Giants, Sons of the Gods, Covenant Theology, Christ in the Old Testament, and the Q&A companion to the late Dr. Michael Heiser's best-selling supernatural game changer, The Unseen Realm. Please welcome Mr. Douglas Van Dorn. He's a multi-time, critically acclaimed best-selling author, award-winning documentary film director, and the founder of Skywatch Television, Dr. Thomas Horn. His broadcasting career has spanned over 25 years and counting. He's the best-selling author of the groundbreaking books, The Great Inception and Last Clash of the Titans, Mr. Derek Gilbert.
Hey, Tricky, good night, mate.
I used the
God
word
bless.
spectacular
Bass,
because
good to see you, bro.
has been here as we've journeyed through this
Bass, my grandkids are up for a couple of days. That's why I was off. Good night, Tricky. Love you, mate.
Part series. Am I overusing the word spectacular?
No.
Angels and Giants, The Watchers and the Nephilim, and it's no exaggeration whatsoever when we talk about the need to spread this thing out, Rudy, over 4 1-hour parts. This is not your traditional documentary film, 1.5 hours in length. And then there was so much filmed, so many expeditions taken by you and your team, that it had to have a companion DVD, Angels and Giants Illuminated, just to put the additional interviews. And like you described a couple of weeks ago, these moments where people like Dr. Thomas Horn can just decompress. Almost felt like you were sitting in the presence of two guys visiting. They really take kind of the long route around the mountain and really unpack the material. Last week, we just teased ziggurats and what the explanation behind that word and use is. And of course, the crowd exploded when Doug gave his commentary on Jesus being in the middle of all of that. You know, just the stuff that you never hear framed this way until you come to Skywatch TV and listen to these men of high intelligence just unpack their thoughts. In my open, I talked a bit about portals. And last week, I kind of mentioned that people today are seeing stuff, Doug. They're filming things they can't explain. And there will be those skeptics that will toss all of the, you know, babies out with all of the bad bathwaters, and they'll say that this is all curated footage, deep fakes, you know, and artificial intelligence and stuff. Well, most of this video is propaganda or silly. But we as believers know that there's a good deal of these videos that are capturing craft in the sky. You sat here, I believe it was last week, and talked about having a camera on some of the locations where you filmed, staring at the lens of your camera and seeing what you described as orbs floating by, but then looking into the room and even bringing eyewitnesses in. Ladies and gentlemen, parts of my team, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Believers that accept Bible prophecy and they understand the relevance in the Bible of things like portals fully accept a lot of the assertions in this film. To those that are skeptic, I think you guys did a brilliant job being very persuasive. People that aren't necessarily fans of Bible theology can watch this work and go, you know, I don't know about Rudy, but this is a phenomenal and very persuasive, right? I don't know about this Joe Horn Skywatch guy, but this is a very persuasive body of work. In the series Angels and Giants, you guys spent a good deal of time exploring the Southwest and the heavy, heavy presence of stories, historical accounts, visiting with natives, and getting you know, early nation members at high levels to talk to you about their accounts of giants and what they described as portals and star people, their lore and traditions. And Doug, you're a Colorado man, not quite Southwest, but definitely in the heart of First Nation territories. In your view, how much discussion of giants and watchers is there in Native American lore when you actually sit down and talk with them?
Well, we interviewed a couple of First Nations for the show, and they will tell you that there's a ton of it. As far as watchers go, just name the gods, and they're probably on a mountain somewhere. I have a good friend who's a missionary down in one of the Indian reservations in Arizona. Their god lives on the mountain, just right that you can look at right over the area, and they're terrified of this deity. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the watcher idea of it. The giant lore, goodness, it's everywhere. You go back to Magellan and Cortez and the explorers of South America. They have giant stories everywhere. The presidents of the United States, George Washington uncovered a 7-foot skeleton. Jefferson met with this giant head of a tribe. All the rest of the people in the tribe were little, and this guy was cream of the crop. Talked to the guy, looking up to him, you know. Mm-hmm. Abraham Lincoln has an address where he's talking about these giant bones scattered over the whole area as he's speaking at Niagara Falls. The lore of these entities, creatures, are all over the Americas.
Yeah.
Well, and you coming from Colorado, you're probably familiar with the Sand Canyon Pueblo work that was done out of the University of Colorado. There in Sand Canyon, you know, there were these Indians that lived there in the 1200s, and all of a sudden they disappeared, just gone. And so Colorado University went to Sand Canyon to do excavation work, archaeological.
You're talking about the Anasazi?
Well, it's in the area, the same place where the Anasazi, whether these were specifically Anasazi tribe or not, I don't know. But the point is, they disappeared around the same time that the Anasazi who were living in the cliff dwellings there in the Four Corners also suddenly disappeared, leaving behind bags of salt. I mean, they were in a giant hurry to get out of there. And it's very interesting, Joe, because when me and you and Steve Quayle were down inside remember they had to unlock the gate to let us into an area that's not accessible by the public. And so we go down inside there, but our Indian guide got angry when we started talking about giants and how they could have been involved in the cannibalization of the Anasazi. And he's like, we're not Sand Canyon. That's not what happened here. So he inadvertently confirmed what we had already discovered out of this university study. But the dig there, folks, I mean, you can hardly imagine. First of all, Indians of an unusual size that had gigantism or whatever, but these were very tall Indians. Some of them double rows of teeth.
Oh yeah.
Some of them with malformed heads, polydactylism. I mean, just 6 fingers, 6 toes on each hand. So many of the things that are connected to the ancient giants. But here was the part that jumped out at me. They found that these people had literally been torn to shreds.
Mm-hmm.
They had literally been pulled limb from limb. And they even found bones that they connected through DNA back to this site that were 200 miles away, where whatever was grabbing these human limbs were carrying them just like food. And like I was saying to Rudy, you would say, well, you can't eat, you know, a dead human over 2 or 3 days without refrigeration or salt. You're going to get sick. But not if you're Nephilim, because they were a blend of human and animals can eat dead things forever. So they just found some things that opened so many doors in our mind. The idea that the mountainous areas, in the Four Corners areas, other places. That's what we found at Mount Graham. We went up to Mount Graham. I won't go into the whole story, but when we came down, I went on, you know, our mutual friend Sid Roth, I went on his show, and I'm telling him all about, you know, what was going on Mount Graham. But I said that the Apache Indians, they had joined the environmentalists there to file a federal lawsuit to try to stop the University of Arizona, the people that wanted to build this big observatory on the top of that mountain. And I had assumed that they were fighting that because they were there before us. This is something like a cemetery. Their forefathers and foremothers had grown up there. Some of them had died on the mountain. They didn't want much of machinery up there, you know, tearing this place up. This is holy ground. Said that on Sid Roth. Then I get an email from a member of the Apache tribe. And he said, hey, everything you said was fine and dandy, but it's not the real picture. He said, the reason we didn't want them up there is because Mount Graham is one of the 4 holiest mountains in the entire world to all indigenous peoples. And why? Because it is, what he said to me, what you would call a stargate, a portal, a doorway, a specific geographic location through which entities have entered into and exited our world since the dawn of time. So it's all over the Americas.
You know, we haven't mentioned this. I think it's important to at least say it because it relates directly to portals and the other world. And I'm thinking like Skinwalker Ranch that's near me. I'm thinking of the San Luis Valley. A fellow named Christopher O'Brien's written 3 books on the San Luis Valley. It's completely crazy. All this UFO, Bigfoot, you name a cryptid, it's probably been seen down there. What's going on? Well, I think it has to be related, at least in part, to the demonic, maybe also to the Watcher. But why? Well, every single Jew up until at least the early 2nd century believed that when a Nephilim dies, it becomes a demon, that they are the origin of demons.
Wow.
And so you can talk about giants all you want, but when you realize that this was their explanation for the origin of the evil spirits in the New Testament, now you've moved directly into the spirit world, and you can start to understand how portals can make more sense in that context.
Well, even your trip to Gilgal Raphaim, the whole word Raphaim, the shades of the dead.
Yeah,
this is something that is alive in that sense, but not in flesh. It's dead. It's in the other world.
And Doug, this segues really well with what I was getting ready to ask you, because a lot of times people want to see evidence, and they're very fascinated when it gets photographed or videoed. Your guys' series, Angels and Giants, The Watchers and the Nephilim, you guys actually cover this account and the bones in Winnemucca. And of course, this is an occasion where we actually have real bones and skulls that were photographed. Tell us a little bit about how that came about for people that aren't familiar with that story.
Well, so Sarah Winnemucca, she was a Coyote Indian living in Nevada, and she's the first Indian woman to ever write a biography. And she's writing in the 1880s, I think, something like that. And she tells this story of these basically eaters of the dead, giant people that would eat their people. They come and steal them away at night. They would take the bodies, and they would, when they're buried, they would uncover them and take them away and eat the bodies. And it got so bad that they had to have a war. And so this war takes place over near Winnemucca, near this cave, this called Lovelock Cave. And what's so fascinating about the story, she's writing in the 1880s. Okay, she tells about how these giants were killed by her people, burned in this cave. You can go read the story in her biography. But then 40, 50 years later, there are these miners who find this cave and they're like, oh, this got a lot of bat guano in it. We use this for fertilizer in the middle of the desert. So yeah, so they start taking out the bat guano, and there's so much of it. It's feet and feet and feet. They start uncovering these giant bones.
Wow.
And in the very same cave that she had written that these creatures died in. Then they found, like, I think it was like a 12-foot long skeleton in the lake that's right near there. And some of those bones, when I wrote the first edition of Giants, were still in the museum, and you could go to them.
Yep.
And since then, they've been taken away, just like almost every other set of bones that we've had, and you can't find them anymore.
Right. Well, let me ask you something, because there does seem to be this conspiracy of missing bones. Things get videoed, they get photographed, and like.
Okay, Shawnee, I'm out after this anyway. Don't forget to leave a comment on that Oz Decode. It's the only feedback I get. Good night, brother.
Later, the bones go missing. Who would be motivated to hide this evidence?
Well, it's a whole conspiracy theory.
Right.
So my view of it involves the Smithsonian, and that they always seem to be coming along on these digs, and they're there and they're overlooking it. And if it's something real, all of a sudden the bones go missing. And I played around with, like, is it really just a theory, or could there be something to it? And my thought is there are so many of them, and it's only the Smithsonian. It's not like there's 100 different institutions or something. That if even one of them is right, then there's got to be some truth to it.
Right.
And to me, it seems incredible that all of those stories could be wrong. That seems like more of a conspiracy theory to me than the fact that they're telling the truth.
If you have the time, you can sit through hours and hours and hours of periodicals. I mean, not accounts, thick, the microfilm, and look through and you will find them. Giant bones found, giant bones unearthed.
Right.
You have accounts of people giving lectures on them in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Specifically about the Winnemucca bones. There are photographs that they didn't count on there being. M.K. Davis photographed them. Double sets of teeth, like you talk about. So it's the gaslighting is at level 1,000.
You think this is evidence, though?
Absolutely.
Of the willful destruction of evidence.
Think about what it would do to the whole Darwinian there.
There you go. That's what I was going to mention. Is that's when we asked one of the academic, here's an American Indian with a PhD, teaches at the university level. We asked him, well, so where did all the bones go? Look. You were just talking about this, and this is just a few of the pictures that I grabbed before I came here. These are old newspaper articles, and some of these, by the way, I mean, these are New York Times. These are what they would have considered then to be legitimate news sources. We don't today, but they did then. Carbon County prehistoric men may have been giants, and they talk about the bones of skeletons they dug up 10 foot tall here in America. The bone of 9-foot man found in mound. Another one where they had two different rows of teeth, like you were saying a moment ago. But you could literally publish a book that wouldn't be anything more than just these newspaper articles, one after the other, all through the 1800s and early 1900s. And these are professors from universities that oversee the archaeological digs and the extraction. But why? It's probably John Wesley Powell, who went to work for the Smithsonian, and they literally declared war on anybody finding or excavating. And if they had found these bones, they were putting them in their little roadside museums or whatever. They came and confiscated them and they took them away. But the academics in the Four Corners told us, we know where they're at. They're in the Smithsonian. They said they believe that.
Right.
And these are not ignorant men.
Right. And this is all, of course, unpacked in terms of video, presentation, pictures, while Rudy and his team were on expedition all over the world in the amazing body of work, Angels and Giants, The Watchers and the Nephilim. And we want to make sure that you know how you can get your copy of this incredible docuseries right now. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back.
Christ compared the days of his return to those of Noah. And ask for the Angels and Giants Expedition Collection today.
Welcome back to Skywatch TV. I'm Joe Horn, Rudy, and Doug. As we wrap up this series on Angels and Giants, The Watchers and the Nephilim, I would be remiss. I've talked many, many times about your team, this group of men and women that went with you all over the world to get all of this B-roll and to join you on your many expeditions. But Tim Ross,
this is going to be the face that you see almost narrate the whole series.
Absolutely.
He did such a good job in terms of engagement and holding your attention, and his voiceover work. Just a spectacular cast for the center of this. So we want to make sure we don't fail to mention Tim Ross, because he did just such a good job, such a compliment to this whole series. With just a few minutes left on the clock, though, I'd love to get your final thoughts for the guests at home and here in studio audience.
Sure.
Did this project in any way, as you were putting it together over the 3 years that it took to compile all 4 one-hour parts to the docuseries, did it change you in any way as a writer/producer? Did you learn anything as you trekked through this in terms of the supernatural realm? Were you sobered by any particular encounters or events? And the same question to Doug.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the word has kept coming up since the first week we did this, which was congruence. It's been very eye-opening to see at its lowest common denominator the evolution of the style, if you will, of the evil one that kind of progresses with technology, if you will.
This is the first flu I've had in about 10 years.
We're depending on the mystic and on this and that, and it moves as he evolves. The purpose is still the same: is to take down as many with him as he's able to do. And I've seen that, especially when we started delving deeper into things like the modern versions of that, like the New Age. There are so many congruences to this entire narrative with the practices of the New Age world. That was a big eye opener for me because it really shed a light on just how active after the souls of men the devil still is, and how just by tweaking the presentation he accomplishes a lot. So that was a big opener for me. And what I want the viewer to take away from this is that a lot of this is our interpretation as best as we can. Study it. Please study it. Get in there. You know, what will the Holy Spirit reveal to you?
Yeah.
Study it, get in there, roll up your sleeves, and let the Lord speak to you.
Good advice.
Doug, as you adventured through this series as well, same question. Did you find that there were moments that struck you that you want to leave with the viewer in terms of a final commentary?
First of all, this is an ongoing thing. There's so much to learn about it. Every place you go, it's a deep dive into a new place. And being there with Derek and Sharon just a couple of weeks ago in Israel to do some of the same places that we were at filming the show, I learned so much more then. But to me, I think what I want to take away is this. The last 3 years in this world, I don't want to get too political, but I kind of do. It's been bizarre, completely crazy. And there are some very, very wicked agendas that I know you guys talk about with the missing children and with what they're doing with our medical industry and to the people of this earth. And I honestly, and I've talked to other people that will say the same thing, it's having my eyes open to these specific things with the Watchers and the Giants, what they are, the supernatural realm, the entities that these people are literally worshiping.
Yeah.
That helps me to be able to make sense of what so many people are fearful of right now. And people are living in absolute terror, and they don't really know why. And I think it's because they lack knowledge. They don't know how to make sense of what's going on around them. This gives me the ability to make sense of what's happening in a way that if I didn't understand this, I have the peace of Christ always with me. I know that he wins. But having the ability to see what's going on in the world, more than just the knowledge that God is with me, makes all the difference in the world to how I live my life. And I think that this is completely relevant to that.
Right. The spirits that are behind this are the same ones that are currently today behind all of this, all of the polymorphing of our medical industry and the want and the wish to resurrect these entities. So, ladies and gentlemen, have you enjoyed the last few weeks on this series? Angels and Giants, the Watchers and the Nephilim, you simply must make sure that you get your copies of those incredible works.
Okay, guys, God bless. See you tomorrow.